So I'm sitting here talking with Marques Ogden, and I'm privileged to have gotten to meet him from doing a show we did last year. It was called Side Hustles and Opportunities. He came out and was our keynote speaker. He did a fantastic job. Really enjoyed hearing his story and getting to know him. And as I'm moving on with some other stuff, including my Generation Bridge and the Sherwood Enterprises side of things, Marques had reached out a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, what's going on? What's new?" And I just thought it'd be a great time to chat. And one of the things that we deal with, Marques, on Generation Bridge is sort of we look at things from a different perspective of the marketing side, right? So a lot of times you'll see in marketing that people think about, oh, it's millennials, it's Gen X, it's boomers, it's this, right? And really, where as a market research person, I just disagree with a lot of that, right? Because it's saying that I'm going to categorize Marques Ogden into a 20-year swath of people who come from different backgrounds, different areas, different education, whatever it is. And I'm going to say that you're all alike on these on these things, right? Whether it's psychographically or demographically, all that kind of stuff. So demographically, yeah, we might be from the same generation, right? I think you went to school in the late 90s, early 2000s. I graduated
Correct.
in 98. And so ideally what we want to take a look at, instead of thinking about, okay, what are boomers needing right now, or sure, some things would be age-based, some things would be gender-based, and some things would be relative to our demographics, but the vast majority of things is based on what you're going through in your life. It's life stage issues. So I always equate it like this. Yes, I'm a 46-year-old guy. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So I share a lot in common with a guy who's 26 or 27 years old who has young children. Now, just because that person is at the border of a millennial and Gen Z, it doesn't mean that they're dealing with things any differently than I am, other than we're at different life stages, but dealing with the same stuff. So I'm still trying to figure out what kind of schools to put my kids into, or what kinds of things they need to be participating in, what sports, all that kind of stuff. So it's life stage stuff. And one of the most important life stage things that we can have is what we do for a living. And that's really where I wanted to see if we could sit down and talk, and I could interview you for Gen Bridge and just kind of share the word out there about what you're doing and sort of your story. Because at different points in our lives, we have to redefine ourselves.
Right.
Oftentimes that's based on being a husband, becoming a husband, becoming a father, but also in terms of what we do. And as men, what we do often is a large portion of what we identify as ourselves, right? So we're a provider in many cases, or it's what I do for a living that defines me. It's what I do. It's what I'm working at. And so just for those of people who may not know, I don't have a ton of influence out there, but I'm going to let everybody know in my network who you are and give them a chance to see this. But Marques is he went to college at Howard, I believe, played football, turned
Correct.
pro. He turned pro.
Correct.
Like, when you start thinking about like the elite levels of athleticism, I mean, even just to become a D1 college football player is one thing, and then to become a pro, whole other level. And he became pro, played 5 years in the NFL, got out, started a successful business. But many things happen in our lives, and sometimes we have to adjust. And I'm going to let him tell more about his story. But ultimately, we can come on hard times as well, and then we have to rebirth, or we have to, we have to go through a whole rebirthing process of who we are as a person, as a man, etc. And his story is extremely compelling, and he's done it all. He's lived through it all, but now he's speaking and doing all kinds of amazing speaking engagements. He's coaching people. He's taking all that experience that life has thrown at him, and he started to change things around. And as far as I'm concerned, Marques, I don't think you've had a week where you basically haven't been off and running since we did the show. I mean, especially since the pandemic has lifted, and now we have trade shows and conferences and all kinds of things. When I follow you on social media, just you're off and running everywhere. And so, Marques, maybe you want to give us a little bit more background before we go into sort of talking about what it is to reinvent yourself as you
Mhm.
get to a different point in your life?
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Brian. So again, my name is Marques Ogden. I'm from Washington, D.C. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina with my wife and two daughters. I am a national, international keynote speaker, executive business coach, consultant, best-selling author, brand ambassador, and I am the podcast co-host of the Lev and Marcus Show. We are a globally ranked top 1.5% most listened to podcast. I play in the National Football League after about a 5-year, almost 6-year career, got out of football, struggled immensely with transition issues, alcohol addiction. I got into construction, built a massive organization, 8-figure business. As the company grew, Brian, my ego and my bravado grew right along with it. I made a lot of bad mistakes. I ended up getting very egocentric and very self-centered and focused on just myself. And money and fame and notoriety, what I call external motivating factors. And I was trying to live a life in the conscious mind, which was just like aware of things when I was alert, awake. I didn't really do a great job of pulling and harnessing my chi from my subconscious mind, where I didn't do a good job of aligning my habits with what I wanted to achieve business wise. And there's a saying, when your habits don't align with what you want to achieve, your habits always win. So I ended up losing my business, lost all of my money, lost my home, lost my cars, lost everything. And I ended up moving to Raleigh, North Carolina. And I moved here to work for Merrill Lynch, worked there for a short time. I got fired, all of my fault, went to a construction company the next day, was fired from that job 5 days later. And I ended up working as an entrepreneur, doing some football training. I then got into working as a custodian just to pay the bills. And then I had my rock bottom life, altering, changing moment where somebody's trash and rotten meat and nasty protruding garbage got over my body, my skin, and my clothes, Brian. And that was my wake up call. That was my reality time to say, yes, if I don't fix where I'm at, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. And that's what I did. And I came home, wrote down my 3 biggest strengths. And I said, wow, let's be a keynote speaker. Let's help people. Tony Robbins was a janitor. I could be a speaker too. So I launched the business, but I didn't live by the law of value, which states your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. I also wasn't living my life by the law of influence, which means when you abundantly put people's needs before yours, you influence them for the better. Well, because of those things, I didn't get a paid speaking job for 2.5 years. Got my first paid speaking job April 2016 with Miller Mock College. And I learned the business, how to speak, how to do things, how to get better. And now here we are. We've worked for 38 Fortune 500 brands as a speaker in the last 6 years. Of the 38, 15 are Fortune 100, 5 are Fortune 25. Equitable, Home Depot, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch are all Fortune 25 brands. We have been very blessed to have some large consulting clients. We just landed Weber Popcorn, Weber Popcorn Manufacturing out of Evansville, Indiana. And we're doing some other great work, some other institutions. We were actually just named, Brian, one of the top 100 for Core Magazine, most influential Blacks today. They had on that list for like Samuel L. Jackson, Janet Jackson, Tina Turner, Damon John, LeVar Burton, just name a few. And we were actually highlighted as one of the 4 main people in a USA Today article, which was phenomenal. And here we are today, my friends, speaking, coaching, consulting. We're a 3-time best-selling author. And again, very fortunate that a lot of people find value with us when it comes to our podcast.
Well, let's talk about what do you think that value is? What are people getting from you that is now just resonating and helping you to grow?
Great question, Brian. Anybody that's listening to this show, you want to develop a USP, a unique selling proposition. AKA a UBR, a unique buying reason. And our unique selling proposition is that with me, you get someone that has succeeded, but also, Brian, someone that has failed and failed big time and lost everything and failed because of his ego and because he got so fixated and blinded by the things that don't matter. And I feel when you're speaking to people or you're coaching people, people want you to be authentic. It's important to have EQ in any business, especially the coaching speaking business. And because we have had success, but also failed at the highest level and lost everything, and now have come back and built a successful organization with the right processes, with a strong foundation in marketing, sales, operations, and finance. Now we're able to help people much greater than other people, just because the value of, again, not what I did correctly, but more importantly, Brian, what I did incorrectly is really coming through, and people are taking that and using it to help them get where they want to go.
Well, so that actually ties in exactly with where we fit on the Generation Bridge side, right? So I started it up because I feel like, again, for me, relationships are extremely important. So you've got to go out and make relationships. You've got to meet people. I'm a natural introvert. It makes it pretty difficult at times, but you've got to go meet people and just get to know them, because you never know where serendipity is going to come from. But one of the biggest things that I think we lack when we get into like a more social media atmosphere and so forth, well, that gives us breadth, right? We don't necessarily get that quality of connection. Or if I think about my church and everything else, where you've got elders who are there who have lived through the things that you're going through now. They've actually learned from doing it, right? Like they made the mistakes that I am yet to make. And if I'm smart, I'll listen to them and I will learn from their mistakes, and I won't make the same ones. And oftentimes I find that that's the case. We don't do that until we finally learn that our parents actually knew something that we didn't think they knew, right? Like, so I always look at it from my own perspective, and I think, well, I really didn't say that my mom knew so much until I was about 28 or 30 years old. And then I started to go, okay, it's making sense now. I understand what you were saying when you did this. You were a single mom for a large portion of my childhood, and you know what? You did a great job given how hard it is to raise kids, right? Until you actually can live in their shoes, you don't often know it. And so therefore we kind of like leave it behind, and we don't pay attention to it until we have to learn it the hard way. So I feel like that's the kind of stuff that you're able to share that many others may not actually have that perspective of what they failed in, right?
Correct.
If you had something if you wanted to kind of look back and say, if you're reinventing yourself, here are some things not to do. Do you think you have a couple of those sort of ideas? I mean, like I look back on things and I can think through like what would I have done very differently? And I know a lot of people say no regrets, and I got no regrets. I'm here because of who I am and what's happened before. But I have to say that I would do things differently because I've learned lessons, right? So what kinds of things would you do?
Two big things. One, I would never let my ego get bigger than the good part of my soul. We all have an ego. It is in our DNA. As long as the good part of our soul is bigger and has a much broader place in our body, in our hearts, in our mind, then we're going to live a really, really good life. My ego got bigger than the good part of my soul. That ruined me. And the number two thing I would do is learn to listen to your trusted team members. I was paying people payroll and I wasn't listening to them. I wasn't taking their advice. I wasn't taking their guidance. I wasn't utilizing, what they were bringing to the table, their expertise, their knowledge, their capacity. And because I wasn't treating them correctly, they felt undervalued and underappreciated, which means what? They eventually left the organization. And because of my arrogance and because of my really nasty, egotistical attitude and not listening to people, it cost me everything. So number one is never let my ego get bigger than the good part of my soul. And number two, never ever not take the advice of your trusted people that you're paying payroll to. Otherwise, you're just wasting your payroll.
No, absolutely. And I think if you're looking at something like that too, even if they are not leaving, right? Because again, the vacuum that someone takes away when they leave is a huge, huge vacuum, but they're not fighting for you either. You know,
Oh, absolutely not.
When they're working for you, they're just doing it for the paycheck if they don't feel like they're trusted and valued.
Correct. All they're doing is they're working just to pay the bills because they know and they feel you're not valuing them, which means, well, why should I work hard and why should I give my all if you're not going to value me and or my opinions?
You know, and I think some people misinterpret value versus, you know, like listening to everything that somebody says. You don't actually have to agree with someone who works for you. You don't actually have to decide to go down that path. But what you want to make sure you're doing is you're hearing what they have to say, and you're recognizing that they're trying to provide that value. They're trying to provide help or something. And then you work through that process too, if you disagree. So it's like, you know, most of the time there's someone's giving you really good, honest advice because they do care for you. And if you just hear that and let them say that, even if you don't end up going down that same path, at least they feel like they're valued and listened to.
Correct. And it's all about being able to either have compassion and or empathy for people. Compassion is the innate ability to feel something for someone, yet you have not been in their shoes. Empathy is the innate ability to feel something for someone, yet you have been in their shoes. And EQ and servant leadership moves mountains in business. It moves mountains in your work. It moves mountains in sales and marketing. If people feel that you can connect with them, you have a very good chance of getting their business. If they feel you're just looking at them as a transaction or a transactional sale, chance of them working with you goes way, way down.
So what are your thoughts? How do you see like sort of small business and big business playing in this space, right? Because a small business, I can be much more connected, right? I can be more involved. I can actually, if I've started up my own thing, I can do a lot of those things that you're saying, and I can do it wholeheartedly. Big business, how do you do it as a large corporation when you have a certain brand ideal, but you have thousands of people working for you who are being asked to carry out that ideal, but who obviously not everyone is going to be aligned, right? So what do you think about like sort of the dynamics of small business and big business and how they kind of play together as you take a look at sort of the servant leadership sort of perspective?
Small businesses can be much more pivotal. They can change quickly. They can adapt faster. They have less red tape to go through, which is awesome. But the problem with small businesses is also the same token. Sometimes they're not equipped to do the business. So if you're a small business and you're trying to adjust, that's phenomenal. Just make sure you're taking on what you can take on and don't take on more than you can chew. That's number one. Number two, any big business that has great leadership, right, at the mid-level managers and the C-suite level that is able to connect with their frontline workers is going to be successful. That's why you see a lot of the same organizations in the Fortune 25, Fortune 50, et cetera. For example, Walmart has been number one on the Fortune 500 list in our country, 9 years in a row. 9. Apple's up there, Google's up there, Home Depot, Equitable to Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, so on and so forth, because they have figured out how to be pivotal and how to adjust quickly when it comes to trying to communicate leadership and effective training. This is why it's so important to invest in coaching, invest in consulting, invest in training to be able to what? Teach people how to emotionally connect with people, how to really put out servant leadership, and how to do what? Create the ultimate customer experience, not customer service. Customer experience is when you come to the table and you're able to get from start to finish that individual to feel a phenomenal process. customer service is when you're trying to fix something that goes wrong, which is also important. But if you can deliver a phenomenal customer experience from start to finish, that puts you in a great position to get where you're trying to go.
Well, and customer service is a key element of customer experience, right? Problem resolution. If you have a problem, that's going to take down your satisfaction numbers or other things like that. But if you fix the problem, you're going to have someone who's an advocate for you. And so, we look at something like that in the research world, we call that a delighter, right? It's if you're able to fix my problem in the first iteration, or at least I feel like you took you really did a good job of addressing my concerns and fixing my problem, then I might be a lifelong customer and an advocate for your brand. Versus if I have a problem and nothing happens, then I'm going to be done with you and that's it, because most things, especially at the commodity level, like, if it's a bad product or something like that, it's just not something I'm going to waste my time with trying to fix that relationship.
You got that right.
The last question I want to ask you. So as I look at, when we do the Generation Bridge stuff, we are looking to share wisdom back with either different generations or others who are in the same life stage issue that we have. So you've got a long life of experience and everything else. And I've heard, the ego side loud and clear, right? But what advice would you sit down with your 18-year-old self and say, here is what I would tell you, this is what you're going to think is important. This is not important. Focus more on this, this, and this. What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Focus on hiring a coach to help you with life off the field. I had a coach in every aspect on the football field, high school, college, NFL. I didn't get a coach in my life until, I went to in 2018. I was 37 years old. So I retired from football at 27, almost 28. So it was almost a decade after I left the NFL that I finally hired a coach. When I hired a coach, this is my acronym for coach: caring, objective, affluent, consistent, high performer. Someone that cares about you and where you're trying to go. Objective, someone that's going to look at things fairly and give you not what you want to hear all the time, but what you need to hear. Affluent, someone that's going to open up their resources to you to help you succeed. Consistent, someone that's going to always be there and show up. And a high performer, someone that can execute when it really matters. And that's exactly what we do, and we strive to execute for our clients, being caring, objective, affluent, consistent, and a high performer. But I would tell my 18-year-old self, Marques, hire a coach. You had a coach in sports your whole life. You need a coach in life to succeed outside of the game.
I think that's great advice, Marques. Really, really do. And the last thing that I'll ask you, because we got like 2 minutes left. But the last thing is, how can people get in touch with you, and what can they do?
They can go to our website, www.marques, MARQUES, Ogden, OGDEN.com, or you can shoot us an email, marques@marquesogden.com. Get in touch with us, connect with us, and let's have a chat.
Yeah, and you're open to speaking engagements, you're open to coaching engagements, consulting engagements, and all that kind of stuff.
Correct. Absolutely. Coaching
Check you
engagements.
out on the podcast.
I was going to say, also, if you're a business looking to get some exposure in marketing to a very specific audience that does business and looks for consumers and products and goods and services, you can also do that as well, which is go to our podcast and check us out, The Lev, L-E-V, and Marques Show. Subscribe on Apple, Google, iHeart, Stitcher, and check us out. We love to hear from you and let you think about the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marques. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. And everybody, trust me, he's a great speaker. You won't be disappointed when he comes out and does your show.
Appreciate you, Brian. Have a good day now.
Thank you. God bless.